January 30th, 2026. Today was a tough day. I have started this wonderful routine in my classroom of doing novel studies on Fridays. I am not allowed to read novels with my students on any other day. My seventh graders have been reading The Princess Bride, and we just started watching the movie. And I had an activity for them to do alongside with it. And it's a required TEK for students to explore cross media stories. All of that being said, I still had to keep this from the district. The district did not want us reading novels with the students at all, just working through the textbook program that they had spent millions of dollars on. A financial decision that takes away my ability to teach these kids how to read. The kids of the generation with the lowest literacy rates in a century. I felt like I was working in secret, an undisclosed project of true love, revenge, sword fights, and torture. I had never imagined that my most classified scheme would involve so much Wallace Shawn, a secret plan to improve the literacy rates of Gen Alpha. My kids were really invested in the book, but it was taking us way too long to get through. So we needed to put it down so we could work on something more aligned with the curriculum. I didn't want to teach my kids to give up, though, so I'd asked permission to show the movie. I had created an activity to go along with the movie so they could follow along. The movie even had Spanish subtitles, which is amazing for my emerging bilingual students. My instructional coach was on board. She thought the lesson plan sounded really good, but she just knew that if the district did a surprise walkthrough, that they wouldn't like it. I told her that if they did a walkthrough, I would shift gears and play the part. Well, last night, I received a text message from the modern Paul Revere of education, alerting me to a surprise district walkthrough. So I stayed up, preparing to start group projects tomorrow instead of finishing the movie. I also stayed up worrying about having to tell my students that we can't finish this awesome movie that they were all so excited about, and to enforce something that I didn't believe was good for them. But I did it. I got up earlier than I usually do on Fridays to go make copies and comply. There was one problem, though. They came during my sixth grade class. This was fine. I was prepared for this. The only problem is we were also reading a novel. I had justification for this novel as it was one of the suggested side readings along in our textbook and came with a reading guide to do so. So I was technically reading from the textbook. It came in during my first period. I was already shorthanded in my support, and we had just finished chapter 2 of A Wrinkle in Time and had finished discussing it. And the second my finger depressed the play button on chapter 3, I heard the dreaded sound of admin's keys rattling through my door. I continued like nothing was wrong. I continued doing what I was doing, just with the knowledge of being observed. They were in my classroom for about 10 minutes. I know this for a fact because I noted the timestamps on the audiobook. They walked around, looked at what the kids were doing, and then sat and listened for a couple of minutes. Then one of the district people pulled me aside in front of 17 sixth graders to tell me that my kids are all engaged, but it was just unrealistic of me to expect them to pay attention that long. And then I needed to break it up and ask them about what they were highlighting. All of this good advice, I calmly told him that we had just done a break the second he walked into the room. And he stopped me and told me that these kids cannot pay attention for more than 2, maybe 3 minutes at a time, and that I need to be taking that many breaks. All right, let me be honest. I know that these kids' attention spans are short. And to combat this, I have been purposefully prolonging our reading time bit by bit. Again, this isn't something I am measuring, but I'm trying to help these kids understand what it feels like to be still for 10 minutes. And guess what? They can do it. I had to hold back tears as he and my principal walked out my door, and I was left with the confused faces of 17, 12-year-olds. I stopped the audiobook, which, by the way, had been playing the entire background of this, which led to the overwhelmingness of the situation. The kids asked me what he said and why he was talking to me like that. Even they understood that what was happening was strange. I told them that it was fine. I told them that I'm sorry, and I made us all take a deep breath and reset together. But by that point, the class period was almost over, so I'd let them clean up. Then my seventh graders came in. I had never seen them so excited as they were to watch that movie. The bell rang and they all sat down, and I went to the front of the class. And immediately the kids started asking me if I was sick or if I hadn't gotten any sleep that night. I came clean, told them that I had been crying, and told them that we couldn't watch our movie. They were really sad. Some of them even told me that it was probably going to be their favorite movie. All right, now I have to back up here. Yesterday, the seventh graders were telling me about an ice walkout that they had been planning for the next day. I told them that I wasn't allowed to help them with it in any way, but if they organized and did it really well, I would have no other option but to make sure they were safe. So today, when we were doing reading workshop, they asked me if they could make posters for the protest. I informed them that I absolutely could not provide them with poster paper or give them time to work on posters in my classroom. I then just happened to sit a stack of printer paper and markers out on my desk and said that if they wanted to draw during reading workshop, that I was okay with it. I wasn't technically organizing a protest, right? The entire time I was attempting to support my students' needs while also trying to toe the line between what was allowed and what could get me removed from the classroom. And in Texas today, that line is incredibly blurry and sometimes unrecognizable. I had never seen that many students engaged in a project. Almost all of them were working on their own poster. But by the time it was up, I asked them to start working on their group projects, and they complied for the rest of class. When the bell rang, I told them to be safe as I always do on Fridays, and I closed my door and I ate my lunch. We then got an email from the principal saying that she recognized the walkout at 2 p.m. and the students can gather on the track. We were not allowed to inform the students or direct them in any way, but we were also not allowed to stop them. As the next class began, a lot of teachers reported their students never showing up. Most of mine did, and if it had anything to do with the fact that I had talked to them about it ahead of time, we may never know. Since I had allowed my first class to draw, I did the same with this group of kids. They made signs, and we talked about how to be safe and how to come back for the last period. And about 1:45 came around, and I thought, I had better go to the bathroom before all of this chaos begins. So I left my class with another teacher. When I got back to my classroom, most of my students had left. They decided to join the other kids who had already walked out prematurely. So I followed the remaining stragglers to an empty track. The kids had moved to the front of the school because they wanted to be seen. So we went to the front of the school. My school is on a giant hill in the middle of a giant park behind a neighborhood. So it takes a long time and is a long way to any real major streets. I stayed at the top of the hill with the other teachers at first. But as I saw more and more cars coming onto campus and more students going out of sight, I decided to go down the hill and to make sure the students stay out of the street. When I got down there, the same district man was the only other adult down there. I helped him wrangle kids for a while, and he told me twice to go back up. The first time was because I didn't have a coat on. I told him this was fine. It was 50 degrees, which is basically bikini weather where I'm from. The second was to get my classroom prepared for the next class. I obliged this time, leaving him alone down there. As my students trickled into my last class, I knew there was no way we were reading A Wrinkle in Time. So I had them work on their group projects. Yes, this is something I should have just had my first class do anyway. And then they helped me clean the classroom. I heard murmurs in the hall that Mr. District was still chasing kids on the first floor. The other teachers suspected karma. And the hardest part about all of this was I couldn't do what I was brought to that school to do. At one point, I was talking to another teacher about how proud I was that they organized and did this. And they had responded, "Yeah, but a lot of them don't understand what's going on." And I walked away from that conversation with a stone in my heart, as I knew I wasn't allowed to help them understand. I wasn't allowed to help explain to them why all of this was so important. And I couldn't explain to them how proud I really was of all of them. Dear students, you deserve better, and I am going to do better for you. I love all of you more than you can even imagine. You don't know it, but you helped me get my life back. You reminded me what it feels like to be young again. Through every lesson, every fight, and every laugh, both of us learned so much more than we ever anticipated. At the end of all of it, I only have one wish. I wish I could go back and slow down and enjoy it more. And I hope you know that I really tried. When you're in middle school, everyone wants to tell you about what a confusing time it is. What they don't tell you is life never stops being confusing. Just when you think you understand, something comes along to change the game. And that never stops happening. However, there's one thing that you reminded me of, and that it really helps. And that is to approach each new challenge with full conviction and believe in yourself in every step. There's one thing I want to remind you of, and that is to love with all your heart. One thing I really tried to do as a teacher was to model the behavior I wanted to teach. I wanted you to read more, so I made sure you saw me reading. I wanted you to write more, so I tried to write in front of you as much as I could. And I wanted you to show love to everyone you met, and so try I did. I didn't always succeed, but when I failed, I made sure you saw me apologize. I hope you treasure the memories with rose-colored glasses because you all deserve that. At the end of the day, the memories are all we have, so hold on to them. So here we are. My classroom is packed in my car, and I have seen you for the last time. I hope you know how much I already miss you. We created a little family, watched it grow, and now it's time for us to go our separate ways, with our identities forever changed. Everywhere I look, I am reminded of you, of the fact that it was my job to care about you, to love you, and to keep you safe. And now, it's all over. It's someone else's job now, and I have faith that they will love you the way that you deserve. But I also will not stop caring about you. And that is why I wanted to start this podcast, to try and make things better for you, because I love you. Even if you aren't one of my students, I love you and I want a better education for all of you. Education is the foundation with which our society sits upon. Without a solid education system, our society will crumble. Even if you don't have children, you will still benefit from having a good public education, because our future will benefit. I spent 1 year teaching 6th and 7th grade English at a Title I public school in Texas. I am ashamed I only lasted 1 year, but I couldn't go on. I'm not going to sit here and complain to you the entire episode. My goal with this podcast is to evaluate the current needs of education through a positive lens. I believe that the questions we ask go on to shape our reality. So, in order to provide a better reality, I aim to ask positive questions. I want to know what is working rather than just complaining about what isn't. My goal is to record 180 episodes, one for each day I was a teacher. I want to interview a wide array of educators. I want to hear from teachers, of course, but also we will hear from admin, security, parents, and maybe even a few students. I also want to interview a diverse group of teachers, those who have been teaching for 30 years and those in their first year. core subject teachers and elective teachers, those who teach the littles, those who teach the teenagers, and those brave, brave souls that teach the middle grades. I want to hear from public, private, and charter teachers. I aim to document a full picture of our current state of education and provide actionable items as to how we can make education better. I truly believe that if teachers are given the time and space to do their job, that schools all around could improve. You are going to hear from teachers what makes them successful at their jobs and what they need in order to do a better job. I hope with this, we can build a better foundation for our future to rest on. Thank you so much for listening to the Unauthorized Teacher Podcast. Please follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, or Patreon. My name is Regan J. Bencall Mashburn. We'll talk to you next time.